Have you seen my name? 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 I've been searching and searching almost my entire life.
What is a delabored articulation of Black womanhood? How has performance historically been a tool for acquiring a subject position for the Black gender marginalized? What role can theater play in transporting Black women from a liminal plane of existence to a liberated one?
Hi, my name is Allison Oddman, and my Honors in the Arts capstone project is a choreopoem entitled I Am, Tell Me Who, Tell Me What. I Am, Tell Me Who, Tell Me What is a 2-act choreopoem that follows a young Black woman's journey to achieve self-actualization outside of the colonial constraints that have been placed on her identity. In the first act of the play, the protagonist, Tell Me Who, Tell Me What, meets 3 other Black women named Aidi, Farin, and Jamaica, who share experiences with Tell Me Who, Tell Me What that are very much rooted in an adjacency to both Blackness and womanhood. In this act, the women grapple with colorism, desirability, structural misogynoir in the workplace and everyday interactions, but also find time to celebrate and honor the autonomy they have been able to cultivate for themselves, despite the aforementioned forces against them. In the second act, Tell Me Who, Tell Me What retreats into the womb of her ancestors to track how those who came before her rendered themselves eligible outside of racialized, gendered, and human binaries that incessantly denied them access, and thus the neoliberal goal of visibility. At the end of the play, Tell Me Who, Tell Me What is finally able to name herself, successfully transitioning from the passive existence of declaring outside wielders of power make sense of her presence to an autonomous position in which she has assumed the fundamentally human right of declaring who she is.
Act 1, Scene 1. Tell Me Who, Tell Me What meets a trio of Black women and discovers how they received their names.
I am Jamaica. I mixed water, blood, and sugar and held it up to the sun. I looked inside and saw my name there. I rubbed it all over my skin, let it seep into my bones so it could know me real well, and I could know it. I am Farin. It was born out of a heated night between desire and deception. It's not really mine to claim at all. I was taken and put into it, and I didn't have a say about whether it fit me or not. People say it's the type of name that fits everybody, but I don't think that's true, especially for a body that looks like mine. Me, Aidi. I got my name riding the back of a hurricane that started a revolution. Its winds and rains and screams and cries exhumed the blood of my people from the soil and fashioned new, free life out of it.
This project is a 75-page choreopoem that was mentored by theater and performance studies professor and Broadway playwright Young Jean Lee. The guiding frameworks and concepts that helped bring this project into fruition were Black feminist theory, specifically the work of Hortense Spillers, Black performance theory, and the choreopoem medium developed by Black dramatists Ntozake Shange, as well as the theoretical framework of instrumentalism. The trio of women in the first act of my play are named Aiti, Farin, and Jamaica, respectively. Aiti is the Haitian Creole translation of the English word Haiti. Farin is a Jamaican patois word that typically refers to America, and Jamaica's character is named after the country. I wanted to situate these names in a Caribbean context, in part because of my own Jamaican heritage, but also in acknowledgement of the racial and colonial violence that took place in this region and catalyzed modernity in the process. Through these violences and the onset of chattel slavery, notions of race, as well as the gender binary, began to develop and be enforced. Black feminist scholar Hortense Spillers describes in her seminal text, Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, the Middle Passage, the portion of the triangular trade in which millions of West Africans were brought to the Americas as part of the Atlantic slave trade, as a crucial factor in the ungendering of Black women. Ungendering is defined as the removal of gender from an individual, which Spillers credits the transatlantic slave trade as doing to Black women, so much so that an alternative framework of liberation is needed for Black women who have been forcibly stripped of femininity and motherhood. In plantation societies, Black women performed the same strenuous labor as their men counterparts. Black women's reproductive labor was heavily exploited as the longevity of slavery was dependent on their procreation and the sexual violences oft associated with it. Through slavery, Black people were reduced to flesh, and the suture that developed between them and commodity still places Black women adjacent to womanhood, a construction that remains occupied by white women. I began to conceptualize Blackness as a construct that fluctuates in perception and even meaning across the spatio-temporal. I played with this idea in the second act of the play, where Tell Me Who, Tell Me What retreats into her ancestors' womb to track how they forged definitions of race and gender for themselves in the midst of evolving definitions of Blackness. The womb space cultivated here is degendered and is not a site where my protagonist goes to assume womanhood, but rather a site emblematic of the limitless individual, a site where Tell Me Who, Tell Me What can grow into her own identity outside of the capitalist and colonial influences that are ready to define her and other Black women from birth. Tell Me Who, Tell Me What travels to 3 different landscapes and time periods that delve into how her Black women ancestors used performance to achieve freedoms from the oppressions their respective societies imposed. Tell Me Who, Tell Me What goes to pre-colonial Igbo society, where she sees a performance of the sitting on a man ritual that Igbo women would perform in retaliation of men's abuses of rights. She then goes to a 19th century plantation where she sees how Black women created articles of clothing for themselves that helped them claim the femininity, the shapeless and rough clothes they were given to work the fields, clothes that made them largely indifferentiable from the men they worked alongside, had taken from them. These clothes they made, such as their own version of the popular hoop skirt at the time, were worn in locations outside of the ones where the performance of the enslaved had to take place, i.e., in their private quarters, secret parties, and private gatherings. Finally, Tell Me Who, Tell Me What is taken to latter 20th century Chicago, where she encounters a Black woman playwright who is morally struggling to write the stereotype-laden play she has been commissioned for by a white theater company. I executed this play via the choreopoem device, which was originated by Ntozake Shange. I think the choreopoem is an adequate vehicle for Black women to enter into a subject position because of the play's structural departure from Western theater in its nonlinear, loose narrative construction and its West African theatrical influences that emphasize call and response, rhythmic chanting, and encourage audience participation. Shange's choreopoem device was in part created to prevent audiences from holding any stereotypes about a character, because no character would be clearly defined, and their scenes would not be strictly tied to one another. In my choreopoem, the vignettes that constitute the first act of my play are not strictly tied to one another, or to the character. Rather, my characters should be seen as actors acting these vignettes out. Additionally, the poetry of my project presents an opportunity for a subverted English language structure to be used when describing my characters' experiences. Through the use of non traditional verbs, idiosyncratic punctuation, and repeated instances of call and response, I create a new vocabulary for these characters' relationship to womanhood to be articulated. My project is then able to provide these Black women a subject position within a production centered around womanhood, while still giving them the opportunity to exist within their Blackness. This play is a project that I created in the vein of instrumentalism. Instrumentalism is a philosophy of art practice that claims that art has the ability to do more in society than just be aesthetically pleasing or decorative. Art, in the mind of the instrumentalist, has the ability to call individuals to action, an action that is usually political in nature. We can take a look at the Black arts movement of the 1960s and 1970s to see instrumentalism at work. Artists such as Nikki Giovanni, Sonia Sanchez, and Rosa Guy expressed in an array of mediums, including poetry, theater, visual art, and film, the myriad Black experiences, plights, and triumphs that were being ignored by external American society. The movement helped catalyze the creation of Black studies programs in universities and the formation of Black-owned art institutions, publishing houses, and magazines. Art became the way through which people conveyed their political ambitions and local community causes and needs. My knowledge of instrumentalism has deeply influenced my work as a playwright. A big instrumentalist within theater that I look up to is Brazilian practitioner Augusto Boal and his Theater of the Oppressed. An example of Theater of the Oppressed comes in Invisible Theater. In this medium, actors act out a play in real life settings away from the theater stage, successfully blurring the lines between spectator and actor. Within Invisible Theater and the various forms of the Theater of the Oppressed, the audience plays an active role in the performance and has the ability to explore, show, analyze, and transform the reality in which they are living in. This translates into my work, especially in my second act, through my situating Black women in an anti colonial context. My craft promotes healing for Black women and explores realities in which their bodies are not objects meant to aid in production, reproduce vessels of capital, or be consumed by the lustful, predatory white gaze. The play goes further than the neoliberal agendas of visibility, opting rather to provide the characters with the agency to inhabit aspects of the self that are deemed unworthy of respectability. This play liberates all participating parties, actors, writer, audience, from the inert ideas they had about Black womanhood.
Act 1, Scene 4. Tell me who, tell me what learns to pray to herself.
When I get down on my knees to pray, my tongue does not let slip the J's of Jehovah or Jah. God, it does not know. I whisper my own name when I pray. I shout my own name when I pray. I take my insides out and spell my name with them when I pray. It's a painful process, and when the blood streams from my eye and wets the soil underneath, it joins all the Black names I don't have time to say in prayer. When I pray next time, it will be to you.
The creation of this new anti-colonial reality that stems out of my play and my work in general as a theater artist has shaped my understanding of instrumentalism a great deal. Beyond just seeing it as a call to political action or a catalyst for societal change, I have seen it as an opportunity for subversion and expansion. In my play, I work towards repurposing a medium that has traditionally functioned as a colonial tool into a vehicle towards liberation. My play perceives racial and gender identity as constructs that are in constant flux due to myriad external factors. My characters experience Black womanhood in a contemporary setting, but are then brought into pre-colonial plantation society and 20th century contexts. This travel expands the stage and the space my characters occupy because they are not forced to stay in any one articulation of Blackness or womanhood at any given time, and are constantly brought into new environments that causes them to have a more complex understanding of what those positionalities mean. Instrumentalism gives us a new language and forces us to reframe our relationships with beauty and aesthetic pleasure from being extractive and indulgent to being more reciprocal. There is work the spectators must do on their end. Black trauma and activism have been extremely hypervisible in the digital age. Much of the attention given to Black causes tend to center on issues that mostly pertain to Black men. This is seen in the heightened platforms Black men are given when compared to matters concerning Black gender marginalized people. This play was not only written as a love letter to the Black women who have so shaped my personhood and artistry, but to all the Black non-men who are often swept aside for the upliftment of Black men. Black liberation is contingent on the liberation of the races most vulnerable, without properly addressing the axes of oppression that make survival difficult for Black gender marginalized folks, specifically Black trans women. We will never embody the freedoms we write about. Through this project, I have learned so much about my own identity, my artistic process, and the guiding motivations behind my work. In everything I do, I aim to center Black non-men and cultivate spaces in which they feel free to show up however they may choose to do so.
Act 2, Scene 5. Tell me who, tell me what declares who she is.
My name is not sacrifice, is not last, is not hard to twist out of your tongue. My name is a breeze, is an ocean that sweeps up all the sweet scents nearby. My name is in those scents crests of your nose, is in your lungs, and changes with every exhale. I am reborn. I am reborn. I am.
My utmost gratitude is extended to Dr. Jesse Piggott, Professor Young Jean Lee, Dr. Eileen Robinson, Kiara T. Dunbar, and the 2020-2021 Honors in the Arts cohort.